This is the Garden of English. I'm Tim Freitas, and today we're going to conquer body paragraphing for poetry. So, if you don't know how to do it, you're going to want to watch it. Let's check it out. All right, we have been going through an entire series on poetry, starting with breaking down the prompt and then working on taking notes and ways to approach poetry and all those other cool things. And if you want access to any of those videos, you're going to want to check out right up here. And before we get into today's video about body paragraphing for poetry, I want to just give a quick shout out to the Garden of English's Patreon supporters, and you can see their names here. And I really appreciate what they are doing to support the Garden of English as we work to continuously grow. If you are interested in potentially supporting the Garden of English in any capacity, by all means, I'm going to ask that you check out this video that's also here about helping the garden grow, because we are trying to get bigger and offer more resources to you all, but that does indeed take time and money to do. So, if you're like, hey, you know what, we could easily donate $1 a month to that guy, well, that would be super cool, but it's actually not even that guy anymore. There are a bunch of us that are kind of working behind the scenes, even though you see my face the most. But so please check that out. Please consider supporting the Garden of English. And the easiest way, of course, to support is also to just press like and subscribe, which I encourage you to also do right now so that you don't miss any of the other content that we give out for the AP exams. Or to help you prepare for your AP exams or help your students prepare for your AP exams. But anyway, with that being said, let's get right into things. We are continuing to talk about Ozymandias, and I had actually produced a prompt that I showed in past videos, and you can actually access the prompt down below as well. And it's about this famous poem where the guy actually where the speaker recounts another speaker retelling of a time when he saw these kind of ruins in the desert, and the ruins remained, but the desert was indeed quite desolate. And so, anyway, we've gone through that poem. We talked about it significantly. In the last video, I talked about annotating it. I talked about producing topic sentences. I talked about producing a thesis statement and whatnot. And actually, in the document that we have down below here, this is actually our thesis and our topic sentences throughout the whole poetry piece. And so what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about how we actually produce a body paragraph based on topic sentences. And I do actually have a template for that. And the way the template is set up is I've got my topic sentence template, and then I have an example of the topic sentence. And I have it color-coded, and I'll show you, I'll explain why as I go through this. I have a textual evidence template right here, and then I have an example of me integrating textual evidence, and then I've got a commentary template, and then I have an example of how this actually functions down below. And so I'm going to just walk you through this here, trying to explain a few things in relation to body paragraphing for poetry. So you'll notice that we have our thesis. It's right up top. In the sonnet, Ozymandias, Percy Bysshe Shelley develops a frame narrative, contrasts the work of a tyrant with the work of an artist, and highlights a boastful yet presently unsupported claim, ultimately illustrating that though kingdoms may fall at the hands of time, the communicative power of an artist's creative talents will not. And that's a strong thesis there. And it's going to guide my topic sentences. So I'm going to actually produce the body paragraph for the first topic sentence, and then in our next video we'll actually look at, all right, how do we produce a conclusion? And that's actually going to come from this fourth sentence here. But if you're looking for stems that you can use to kind of write through poetry almost every time, like I said, look in that past video for that, because I gave stems and you can just put things right into the template and you'll get sophisticated topic sentences like this. But anyway, here is my body paragraphing template. Now please note that I do deviate from the exact wording of this template a little bit, but I'm going to point out that I keep the parts. And that's really what I want you all to know. A template is, if I can fall back on this, it will be good, but if I know what parts are there and then I do what I want with them, I might be able to make it better. And so with every body paragraph, you are going to want to have a topic sentence that's going to guide the paragraph. You're going to want to have evidence, and then you're going to want to have commentary. The reason why we want to do this is because this is exactly how we talk. We make claims, we provide evidence for our claims, and then we provide our reasoning for our claims. So we say, hey, here's our evidence, and here's how the evidence proves that our reasoning is correct. Well, we're doing the same thing, but a strong topic sentence will help us know exactly what we have to do. So we produced our thesis, and now a topic sentence, right, for me, is going to include 3 elements, right? And you can put these elements in different ways, but there should be 3 elements. And it should be transitional language, which is going to be highlighted in blue. It should be a reference to where the example is going to come from in the text, which is going to be highlighted in green, and an understanding or some sort of argumentative claim that's more abstract. So we're connecting the claim with the abstraction. And this is really, what is the author doing and why is the author doing it? Right? So our topic sentence is going to have a what and a why. So we have a concrete and an abstract. And that's how we know we're doing it right, because we're mixing the concrete and the abstract as the guiding sentence for our paragraph. So you'll notice that my template here says chronological phrasing, last name of the author, and then lit element or technique 1, in order to, and then textual understanding. What do I understand from the text? Okay. And if you looked at my annotation video, you'll notice that you could just pull a lot of this stuff right down from the annotations that you would put in your poem. But anyway, you'll notice that I did change up the order of my thesis here a little bit, and I didn't even put the words in order to, in my topic sentence. And I didn't even put the words in order to in my topic sentence, but I still have the same parts. I have a chronological phrasing, I have got a what, and I've got a why. And because of that, my topic sentence is still quality, right? So notice I have Shelley begins by immediately producing a reflective first-person frame narrative and including multiple instances of caesura, suggesting that the fractured structure of the sonnet mirrors the present state of the monument the traveler is considering. Now notice what I've done here is I have my chronological phrasing, I've got my author's last name, or my poet's last name, and now I'm indicating what am I going to pull for textual evidence. I'm going to talk about the frame narrative, that first person frame narrative, and I'm going to also talk about the couple instances of caesura that we see at the beginning. So that means that in this paragraph, I'm talking about those things. I'm going to pull that textual evidence in. And when I provide my commentary, once I put the more specific textual evidence in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain how that actually represents or mirrors, right? The structure of the language mirrors the structure of the image that the traveler is reflecting upon. Okay, and that's what the claim that I've made, and so now I have to prove that. So what I'm going to do next, right, is I'm going to put in my textual evidence. Now, before I do that, I want to just point out I could very easily take this topic sentence here and put it right into this template, and it will say the same thing, but I think that you'll notice that this topic sentence is a little bit more rich. I could easily say at the beginning of the piece, Shelley produces a reflective first-person frame narrative and includes multiple instances of caesura in order to suggest that the fractured structure of the sonnet mirrors the present state of the monument the traveler is considering, right? I could put it right in that template. They're both really good, okay? I chose to vary my stem, kept my parts, and the reason why I vary my topic sentence from the template itself is so that I know I can fall back on that template, but when I vary it up, it doesn't sound as mechanical if I use this similar template for every topic sentence. So you'll notice if you go back to this little page here that all of my topic sentences do have the same parts, that what and the why and the chronology, but I don't always say in order to every time. And I could say in order to every time, but I don't have to. So one of the things that you might want to consider doing if you're trying to practice this is turn these sentences into in order to sentences. Or if you write in order to sentences all the time, try to vary them a little bit by taking out in order to, and instead of saying in order to suggest, put comma suggesting, something like that. Anyway, so we have our topic sentence. Now I have to get the evidence in of that frame narrative and the multiple instances of caesura. That's just pauses with punctuation in the middle of lines. And you're going to notice that I have a template for this. It says take, for example, how, and then you choose to put the word after or before there. Choose one or the other. Don't put both. And then it says insert context and textual evidence that shows the verb or device or technique from the topic sentence. Okay? And I'm going to actually just change this right out to technique right now. Technique from the topic sentence. Okay, so we're trying to put this evidence in. Now, the way that you know that you put evidence in well is that you can't tell when your words end and the text begins. And one of the easiest ways to do that is to provide context. And what context is it's saying, here's the text that I want to put in, what's surrounding it before and after. And that's why it's really important to start your evidence with either the word after if you're in the middle of the story, or before if you're right at the beginning of the story or poem, because that's going to force you to provide context before you get to the quote that you're putting in. And that's really, really important to do. Now, you'll also notice that I have these words take, for example, how, and they're crossed out. The only reason why I crossed it out is because you don't actually have to put those discourse markers in if you know that evidence always comes after your topic sentence. But if you're the type of person that's like, you know what, I don't remember to always put evidence next. I try to do what, I don't know, who knows what else. By putting the words take, for example, how, before you put the word before or after, that's going to force you to remember to have an example there. So some people need it, some people don't. So feel free to keep it in there. It's not going to make it sound any worse. But once you remember that an example always comes after a topic sentence, you don't actually need to say for example or for instance or take for example how any longer. Okay? So here we go. I've got my topic sentence. I'm going to read it again, and then I'm going to go read right into my textual evidence. So I've got Shelley begins by immediately producing a reflective first-person frame narrative and including multiple instances of caesura, suggesting that the fractured structure of the sonnet mirrors the present state of the monument the traveler is considering. Take, for example, how, before the speaker grants control of the narrative to a secondary traveler from an antique land, he pauses at the beginning of the forthcoming recollection. Then, at the onset of the secondary narrative, the aforementioned traveler even generates another extended pause, midline, after describing the trunkless legs of stone that stand in the desert, where close by half sunk a shattered visage lies. I had an extra A in there. Sorry about that. But nonetheless, besides the fact that I had the extra A in there, this actually flows really well. It provides context. And notice that I had to put the word before here because I'm at the very beginning of the poem. So I can't say after because nothing actually happened before I started talking from my lines. So I need to say before this happens, this happens. And now what I have is I have a full setup of my frame narrative. I've got a speaker and I've got a secondary speaker. I've got a traveler and whatnot. And we now have the frame narrative set up, but I also talk about the pause. So notice that I highlighted this in a little bit of a green here. I didn't include the dash in the textual evidence. I could have, but I didn't. I just put the pause there. But I did include the next pause that was in the line here. One other thing I want to just point out, because we're talking about poetry, whenever you go down a line in poetry, but you want to quote from one line to another, you want to just put this little dash here. I mean, I guess we would call that a dash or slash or whatever you want to call that. You want to put that slash there. That just shows that in the poem, you've jumped down a line, okay? But anyway, so here we have it. I've got my frame narrative. I've got my pauses for caesura. It's all in here. It all flows really well now that I got rid of that added ah. So we're good to go. So now what I have to do is I have to actually talk about how each piece of evidence here that's in the green, the pausing and the one speaker and the other speaker, I need to now argue how it's a fractured structure and how it mirrors the image that's being given to us in the poem. And that is this fractured, piece of archaeology here. And so this colossal wreck, I should say. And that's what I have to do. So how do you do that? I've got a commentary template here, and what this does is it tells you how to do it. And there's a simple way, and there's a way that's a little bit more complex. My example shows you the more complex way, but the template gives you the simple way, right? Honestly, you could say, after you put your evidence in, you can honestly choose to say the words, this evidence. So I could say, this evidence highlights the fractured structure of the sonnet mirroring the present state of the monument the traveler is considering because. So I'm trying to say this evidence, and then I just pull my argument down from my topic sentence and then put the word because at the end of it to provide my commentary. Or what I could do is instead of saying this evidence collectively, I can break it into sections, which I've done here with all my green, and I could pull on different sections of my green and comment back on each section individually. That's the more sophisticated way to do it. But if you're not used to doing that yet, then just say, hey, this evidence mirrors the state of the structure because, and then you just explain out how they're similar. Okay? The key point here, though, is this. If I say this evidence, I'm going to take my verb from the topic sentence. So we've got suggest that. If I wanted to, I could change it up for highlights or showcases or something like that. And then we're going to pull down the textual understanding in the topic sentence. And you can use synonyms, folks. If this gets too repetitive for you, you can use synonyms. You're going to notice that's what I do. I pull down this idea all throughout my commentary, but I do use synonyms, okay? And then we are going to explain how the evidence does what we say is going on in the pink from our topic sentence. And the key language to do that, folks, is the word because. You want to have cause and effect language all throughout your commentary. And it's really important to get the word because in that first sentence after your quote integration. And you'll see that I actually did that here. And then what you do is you explain how the textual evidence reveals your claim in the topic sentence. And you typically do this by focusing on word connotations, by including really strong verbs in your commentary, and by focusing on, just general assumptions as well. You're trying to articulate how this evidence gets you to an understanding that you said in your topic sentence. And in this case, I'm going to say how this evidence gets me to this understanding that the structure of the poem itself mirrors the structure that we're looking at, or we're supposed to be seeing as we read the poem. And you'll notice, like I said, instead of saying this evidence does this, I actually break it down into different parts. And you'll notice that I'm not necessarily pulling the exact evidence down. I might paraphrase it down here, or I might summarize it down here. But every time you see something green down here, I am recounting something that shows up in the textual evidence here. A lot of times students try to just provide commentary without talking about their quote. That is not how you do it. You have to talk about the language in your quote to provide commentary, right? And so that's really that's one of the things that you really need to realize, that you need to pull down language from your quote and connect it to that idea, and you need to use cause and effect language. So let's check it out. How do I do it? I start with, all right, what language do I want to focus on first? And I want to focus on the idea of a frame narrative that's split in the narration. So I have the frame narrative in and of itself, and now we're going to connect it to the idea in the topic sentence, mirrors the fractured state of the statue because, though the sonnet can be observed and viewed, there is a conspicuous separation between the two main individuals telling the stories. So right there, I'm saying there's a separation between the main individuals, and this is much like, the image that the guy is looking at. He can clearly see the full image, but it's also separate. Okay, and now I'm going to continue to that on my commentary here, though. Mirrored division, notice it's the same idea, mirroring the fractured state of the statue, right? Mirrored division, so mirrored separation, is echoed further in the poem when, though Ozymandias' sculpted appearance and words tell of his reign, the sculptor's work is actually what is fully articulating his, that's Ozymandias' character, to the present viewer, thus suggesting it's actually the sculptor speaking for the famed king rather than the king himself. So now I'm showcasing that there's a separation here where the king is trying to, say, beware, look at my works, right? And, fear me. But the sculptor is the one who actually got that across, because he's the one that could convey the facial features and actually had what the king said across the bottom. So we see a division between who's actually speaking and who is supposed to be speaking. And that's very similar to our narrator, because our speaker in our poem, our initial speaker, right, relies on another speaker to convey the message. So you see this kind of mirrored division of speakers here to get the message across. And notice that now I use the word likewise to further convey, here's how this is similar. So I have likewise, the shifting narrative form takes the view away from the original speaker and projects it onto an unknown passerby. And yet it's the passerby who ultimately tells the story. And I'm trying to say this is much like, the king had his message, fear me, and I'm arrogant, and it's the actual sculptor that got that message across, very much like the passerby here. So I'm just drawing out the correlations here. This divided narrative continues to shift the time frame of the poem into the past, highlighting the disconnected continuity between the past and present. The speaker recounts the words of the traveler in the present, who is recounting an experience in the past about an item from antiquity. So now I'm talking about how the divided, frame narrative actually creates this division over time, which is what this poem is about. So that's why I'm talking about here, and how the poem's about this, the frame narrative mirrors that. Thus, generations of time and history are ironically included and encompassed in the narrative form, which is collectively separated. yet functioning as a whole. So now we see this poem that functions as a whole, but it's separate. And we also see this image in the desert that functions as the whole and it's separate. And we have this image of time, which is separate time periods, which actually convey the span of time as a whole. It's like, wow, look at how complex this is. Okay. And then I have, in a similar sense, this wreckage, though separated, can still convey the perceived might of the ruler, though millennia have passed. And now I've talked all about the frame narrative, and we have to get into the caesura. I can't neglect that, so we're going to shift a little bit. So now I have the greater pauses that both the initial speaker and secondary speaker generate. So now we're moving back to the caesura and how we see it in the poem. Generate, work to highlight the passing of time, the same history that separates the secondary speaker from not only his observation, but the ancient pharaoh himself. And so now I'm talking about how this forced pause of time with the caesura is also articulating, through image, the passing of time that this poem is about, which separates the speaker from history. And so now I'm continuing to draw the parallels here. And then I have the visual interruption of the pauses, that's the long dash and the ellipsis there, turn the lines into fragmented parts, providing a similar sensual experience to that of the image being described by the unnamed narrator. And what I'm saying there is that when you look at the lines and you see that the lines are kind of broken up by these pauses of time, that's exactly what happened to this image of Ozymandias, right? It's been broken up by the passage of time. And so now the punctuation actually mimics that, and as the reader of the poem, I get to sensually experience that. And so all I've done in this commentary the whole time is really worked to try to convey the metaphor here between the structure of the poem and the frame narrative, and the content of the poem itself as the speakers experience it. And so that's how the commentary works. I just really pushed that. Now, this is pretty advanced commentary, I have to admit, but I've also been doing this for a long time. If you could even get half of this done here, if you could just tell me that the lines are split with, visual separation, and that's just like what the secondary speaker is doing, super cool. If you could talk about how the speaker goes back in time and therefore it suggests that time has segments, but everybody's still a part of it. Super cool. If that's what you can get for commentary, that's going to work to score just fine on your AP exam or in any poetry analysis you do in high school or college. On this second page here is the full paragraph, all in order together. So you can see what this looks like as a full paragraph. One last thing that I do want to note, though, is that you'll notice that my textual evidence is only this long. And look at that in comparison to the length of my commentary. So I want to point out that if you provide commentary, it needs to be as long, if not longer, than your textual evidence. So that right there is how you do it. There's a template here that explains how to do this as well. And so the templates are there for you. You can access those templates on my website for free. And this is actually the same template that you can use for any body paragraphing on the AP Lit exam. Now, I'm going to actually make myself a little bigger here. Again, if this video was helpful for you, I'm going to ask that you just click like and subscribe. Why? Because that really does help us here at the Garden of English. And the more that you actually watch, that helps us too. Please consider following us on Facebook and on Instagram. Throw us a like there so you can stay in touch for when we release videos. We have shifted to a Monday and Wednesday release. So if you're wondering if we're going to release videos on a particular day, it's going to be a Monday or it's going to be a Wednesday. Why? Because these things actually take time. Please note that you can support us in a bunch of ways. We've got links in the description for Garden of English merch with posters and things and whatnot. And also, once again, I want to just give a shout out to those of you to the idea of possibly supporting us on Patreon. You can actually get some good perks from that as well for very, very little money for that. So anyway, I look forward to wrapping this up with poetry conclusions, and we're going to use that fourth topic sentence in the document below to actually do that. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out in the comments down below. Or if you write your own body paragraph for a poem, toss it down that uses this template. Toss it in the comments down below. I'd love to see what that actually looks like. So anyway, without further ado, we will see you with our next video. Have a great one.